Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing the 31st of July, about the kind of aspects taking place this week along the overall themes that they highlight to us. But before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It's a tool to give us guidance as to what's unfolding around us. It helps us to recognise where the opportunities for growth are and the kind of spiritual lessons to be learning. But from there, it's up to each and every one of us to apply it in our own lives and to seek to take a course of action aligned with it that's guided by wisdom and not just ego impulse, so that we're following or going with the flow of the astrology rather than trying to fight against it. But in terms of actually making things happen, it's more of an influence and something that has a direct impact. We actually have to work with it consciously in order to get the best out of it. Now, in terms of the aspects this week, I'll just do a quick run through. So, begin with the moon. She's starting in a home sign of Cancer, so this is a time where we may feel that we need to kind of spend time on the home front or go within ourselves and kind of allow the emotions the freedom to express ourselves in order to clear them out. But on Wednesday itself, the moon will enter Leo, so this is a time where we may feel a desire to kind of express ourselves, to embrace the creative energy within us and to encourage or nurture other people's creativity at the same time. And on Thursday itself we'll have a new moon in Leo, so this will be an opportunity for us to make a clear choice in effect as to what level of Leo we want to operate at. Do we continue to operate at the ego if we're at that level, so we do everything for our own sake, or we're always consuming things, or do we seek to operate at the higher levels of Leo, which is about shining our light, having that generosity of spirit, that love, that mercy and that kindness for one another? I'll go into more detail on that in a bit. On Friday, the moon is going to enter Virgo. This is a time where we feel the need to kind of apply that creative energy unlocked in Leo to acts of service, so recognising the importance of creating boundaries or creating routines in our lives that allow us to maintain order, maintain our health, but also to use our creative energy to help one another. Before on Sunday, the moon will enter Libra, and this is a time when we feel that kind of desire to create bridges with one another, to forge connections, to build greater harmony in our interpersonal relationships. Before on Tuesday, the moon moves into Scorpio, and this is a time where you feel that kind of old stuff coming up, or an opportunity to emotionally explore old shadow issues that we haven't resolved yet and let them go. Now, in terms of the other aspects this week, we'll have Mercury's turning direct in Cancer on Wednesday itself, and on the same day a yod formation is going to form, which will carry on throughout the week up until Sunday. So for those of you who don't know, a yod is also known as a finger of God formation. It's where we have two planets 60 degrees apart in a sextile. These are Neptune retrograde in Pisces, Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, and they form two inconjuncts or quincunxes to a third planet, or in this case it's two planets together, Mars and Juno. And this is a formation of spiritual alchemy. It's one that requires that because it's like trying to get oil and water to mix. Mars and Leo, which Mars and Juno are in, just nothing in common with Pisces or Capricorn, because it's energies that don't mesh well, as it were. But if we're prepared to engage in some kind of spiritual alchemy, we can transform Mars and Juno, as it were. So with Mars and with Neptune in Pisces and Pluto in Capricorn, these planets are both collective planets, if you like, or they operate as agents for the soul level of consciousness rather than the ego. So effectively we're being asked to transform our actions and desires and transform the way we interact or engage in one-on-one relationships, so soulmate relationships. So with the Pluto side of it, it's about understanding where we have shadow drives or ulterior motives for doing things. It's all about applying truth to the situation. It's daring to be honest with ourselves about our real motivations for doing things, and it's about breaking free of the ego's level of operation and moving to the soul level. So it's about transforming the desire function of Mars into devotion. So with Mars in Leo and also Juno in Leo, the focus here is about authentic self-expression. It's about learning to give and receive love with one another, and it's about the capacity to embrace the creative energy that flows through us without claiming ownership over it. And it's about the capacity to honour one another in relationships, so respect each individual in the relationship, and it's about encouraging the noble qualities of our being to express ourselves. So things like loyalty, unconditional love, mercy when situations of imbalance are highlighted to us. So rather than judging, we instead extend the hand of mercy to one another. And it's about having that compassionate understanding and that benevolent spirit. So we seek to shine our light by being our authentic selves and radiate the kind of energy that uplifts other people. So rather than trying to make things happen, as it were, it's about radiating the kind of spirit that touches the spirit of other people and gives them a boost. How the other person chooses to respond to it will obviously depend on what level they're at, but it's important we don't try to make things happen. It's more about being who we are, being our true self, and radiating the love that flows from the true self, and allowing that to be the energy that changes things or brings about transformation in our environment, transformation in our relationships, rather than trying to make things happen based on how the ego thinks things should be. We also have Venus entering Leo on Sunday, so around about the time that the Yod formation that's prompting us to engage in spiritual alchemy comes to an end, Venus will be moving out of Cancer and into Leo. So Venus in Cancer has been more about the need for kind of nurturing and emotional sustenance in relationships. Venus in Leo is more about the need to be able to express ourselves in relationships, to have that kind of passion or that engagement with one another where always engaging in or trying to keep things fresh, keep things new. And it's about honouring one another, of having that love and warmth for one another. But it's also making sure that we love ourselves first and foremost. So Venus is known as the planet of love. She also deals with our values. So during this Venus's passage through Leo, where she'll also conjunct the Sun in about a couple of weeks' time or so, this is a time for kind of learning to value our own creativity, or learning to value the inspiration that comes through us and channel that creativity into whatever creative form works for us. Because creativity it's not defined by certain criteria, as it were. It's not a prescribed box. It comes in many different forms, whether it's creativity with our words, creativity with canvas, with drawing, whether it's creativity through the body, so things like dance and any kind of creative movement in that respect. But it can also be about how we use our words. It's about encouraging or exploring new ideas. So it's embracing creativity which is inherently messy and not getting het up about the quality of it. It's just about expressing ourselves, allowing that raw creative energy to flow through us, to become a channel for that creative energy and to encourage it in other people at the same time. Because if we don't embrace the creative energy in the first place, we don't have anything to try and refine into a service when we enter Virgo's terrain later on. So we need to do this work of Leo, of embracing play, embracing the joy of life, of not taking ourselves too seriously. I mean, one of the key signs that we're experiencing a healthy expression of Leo, whether it's to do with the Sun, Mars, Venus, or Juno, or any of the other planets in Leo at this time, is our ability to not take ourselves seriously, to have that lightness of spirit, to be able to laugh at ourselves when things mess up and acknowledge the fact that we have our own hang-ups, we have our own imperfections or our own quirks, if you like, and there's nothing for us to judge one another on. So this is very much a week of learning to transform our desires and relationships, so that it's more about devotion to oneself, or devotion to being our authentic self. So rather than trying to wear different masks and confusing ourselves as to who we are, because we're wearing one mask here, one mask there, it all gets so confusing and tiring. But if we can learn to just lighten up, to spend some time in quiet time, self-reflection, so that we can let go of the ego that's trying to make us play a certain role or be a certain thing for certain people, and instead just loosen up to be who we are and overcome any fear of rejection in the process, to not need other people's validation. It's remembering the old adage of to thine own self be true. It's having that love and joy in life. Of obviously there's plenty of darkness going on around us, but we don't have to let it affect us. It's okay, it's obviously worth being aware of what's going around us, so we're not engaging in some kind of Pollyanna delusion about how the world is at the moment. But that doesn't mean that we can't embrace joy, that we can't seek to be that light that the world's calling out for, because at the end of the day, if we are operating from the authentic self, that light flows naturally anyway. So it's recognising that our innate connection with spirit, God's, the creator, the universe, whatever term you feel most comfortable with, but it's remembering that we already are spirit, we already are love, we just got conditioned to believe that we weren't. And this is a time to kind of learn to relax, to not take ourselves too seriously, and allow love, joy, play and creativity back into our lives. If we, assuming we've even lost it in the first place, some people haven't, and that's great. It's wonderful to meet people who still have that joy, still are very creative, very playful, and have that lightness of spirit, because they don't take themselves too seriously. They recognise that they're not their ego. The ego is just a mask. It's something that interacts with the world around us, but it's not who we are. So, and as I said earlier, we have that new moon in Leo, which I will do another video on in more detail. But this new moon is an opportunity, because the moon is like the subconscious and the sun is the conscious self. It's about bringing the two together, and it presents an opportunity to make a choice, as it were. Do we choose to pretend, or do we choose to believe that we're our egos, and as a result live a life full of insecurities and the need to dominate other people, and where if we see other people shining the light and embracing their creativity, that we feel insecure about that and feel the need to kind of knock them down? Or do we choose to operate from the true self, where we recognise that the light we see in others is the light we have within ourselves, and that the more we connect with our true self through that quiet time and that time to spend focusing on loving ourselves, so we don't need other people's validation, as it were, it's through that self-love and that honouring oneself, of staying true to oneself and not allowing the ego to take over, recognising that the ego is just a mask. It's the way, and the way the ego would try and make things happen is it's usually very controlling or based on fear. But our true nature is love anyway, so why go down that road in the first place? If we have the choice between love and fear, which is essentially the root choice in any given situation, why choose fear and lose all sense of humour, lose a sense of play in life, and get stuck in duty and playing up to a role, as it were? I mean, this isn't intended as some kind of preaching. I've made that mistake before. I have allowed the ego to take over because I wasn't aware of it or wasn't paying close attention to it, and allow things to slip, and I kind of lost a sense of humour to some extent, or it just became very prescribed, but it wasn't who I am. So it's a time to just kind of go easy with ourselves, to spend that time with ourselves, to remember to love ourselves unconditionally and not worry about how other people perceive us, because none of us actually see no one actually sees us exactly as we are, and even then we don't always see ourselves clearly. But if we seek to spend that time in contemplation, we can achieve that level of authentic self-expression, that genuine unconditional love for one another, and we end up with relationships characterized by joy, of creativity, of mutual honoring, and the encouraging of one another to express the noble qualities of ourselves that come through being true to who we are. So that's just a guide for the coming week. There's a bit to take on board, but it's a quieter week than previous weeks. But this is a week to make an important choice between whether we carry on trying to live our lives as though we're the ego, or if we let go of that tendency, embrace that spiritual alchemy that allows us to recognise who we really are. And it's about loving ourselves enough to just relax, not take ourselves too seriously, and to embrace that play and joy in life that allows us to connect with one another, allows us to build bridges with one another, and just have fun with one another, not take life so seriously, and just enjoy the journey. So may the coming week bring you many new insights and many blessings. Take care.